Come one, come all. This is the most popular podcast according to me. It's the How Did This Happen and Why Do I Care podcast. For all your apathetic losers who want to hear a little something and maybe think about a little something, this one's for you. You ever wonder why the FBI agents that just come knocking on your door have these giant rifles, these amazing weapons and ballistics that make you go, why does the government give them these things? Well, this one's a doozy. On April 11th, 1986, the deadliest FBI shootout occurred. Brought to you by the FBI records, quote, unquote, The Vault. The FBI was investigating a series of bank robberies in Miami, Florida. And we have two suspects they've been following for a decent while who've been robbing banks. We didn't know enough about them. But two FBI agents were able to actually tail them in one of their stolen vehicles. The suspects, later known as Platt and Maddox, were armed with military-level assault rifles and handguns, while the two officers were armed with simple revolvers and a shotgun in the back of the police car. The agents, being outgunned already, still chose to obviously go after the criminals. They have a job to do. They go follow them in the car. Eventually, they do get into a bit of a car chase, and they do come to a stop. But here's where things get a lot more violent. Platt and Maddox, now being stopped, have chose to open fire on the agents. More agents come to the scene, and it erupts into a giant firefight. 14 agents and then two suspects. This whole ordeal manages to last an entire 5 minutes, leaving over 140 rounds fired. 14 agents surrounding two men, simply lasting that long already sounds disastrous, but mind you, this is also in a neighborhood. Shots are being fired all around the place. The lack of strategy from these officers led to some dangerous casualties, leaving 2 agents dead and 5 injured. The firefight does end, and Matt and Playdex both do end up being gunned down. But there's still a lot of ramifications from this one event. The Miami shootout ended up being like a wake-up call for the FBI. They had to increase their training, improve the guns they were using in service, and also it really just helped general understandings of trauma in FBI agents. First, a little on the actual FBI training that was needed. In the original case, we actually hear from the inspector's observations, quote, "An examination of the facts in this case has determined that there are no legal issues in this incident." They later go on to say the conduct of the agents involved in this incident was above reproach. They conducted themselves in a superb fashion and maintained their composure in the face of extreme adversity. I would like to throw some wrenches in that whole statement, but not a lot. Mind you, they were in extreme adversity. Very troubling situation to be shooting in the middle of a street. But I think the problem was it happened in a street. There was no actual further training that told them, hey, maybe we shouldn't try and get this guy to open fire in a street. Now, when you're in a chase, you can exactly say, hey, please, 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 please drive away from the city. But I do think it begs the question, why did they engage in the firefight when they knew they had an entire neighborhood potentially at risk here? Things got a lot bloodier than they should have. And also, when backup shows around 14 officers have completely rolled around boxing in Platt and Maddox with 11 cars, again, 14 bodies, all trying to get these 2 men. That's a lot of people, a lot of cars, and a lot of firing. Is this really what I would say as being superb fashion? Did they really maintain their composure? I don't think so. I would have to call that the question. But of course, since this, we've learned a lot. A lot. One of the first things about training I actually wanted to cover was the behind-the-wheel training. Nowadays, FBI agents are taught on 1.1 mile road tracks, weaving through cars, orange cones, the whole shebang, all to make sure you are actually perfect at your job. Instructors are watching closely, maneuvering the entire course to make sure that you know what you're doing, and are also training you to actually be good at high-speed chases like the one we saw in this case. And again, something relevant to the case, reversing out of alleyways under fire, driving while under fire, very important. What actually causes the whole entire chase to go awry is a crash that could have been prevented by such training. But luckily, after the event, we actually see this training. Another important area that we have seen a lot more training in is firearms training. As the API puts it themselves, trainees also spend hundreds of hours across the academy campus on the range, shooting countless rounds of ammunition. New agents need to protect innocent lives and may be faced with dangerous encounters in the line of duty. So it's necessary to become proficient with a variety of firearms, including the pistol, shotgun, and carbine. More on those weapons later. But as one Meyer says, one of the most important things we stress in the academy is firearms training. We spend a lot of time with trainees teaching them how to handle firearms safely and to shoot accurately. Rolling on back to the shootout, accuracy was a big factor in what they were missing in the shootout. 14 officers, 11 cars, 140 shots fired over 5 minutes. That's a lot of bullets fired for 2 guys to not be dead for a long time. It lasted a lot longer than it should have, and a lot more bullets were shot than it should have. Aim definitely was a big factor in this case, but another one was actually the gun safety. Marlez was one of the officers actually helping out in the shootout. But as things got crazy, the lack of training didn't teach them how to actually fight with their guns. It left him shooting his Remington shotgun, almost shooting his brother agent, because he didn't know what was happening. He wasn't trained, and they were in a horrible situation. And as this quote puts it, Marlez realized his Remington 870 shotgun was pointing at a brother agent's back as he ran up to his position to reinforce it. He almost shot an agent. Crazy to think about, but how exactly could the training have been better? Simple. Know what you're shooting at and know how to shoot safely. Of course, I can't put too much slack on their training. Another big issue was that they were doomed from the start. They had already been outgunned before they even started firing. The suspects were armed with shotguns and with an assault rifle that was already way out of the league of anything they had. Mind you, they had a Remington 870 and 9mm pistols. Those things were not packing any punches. Matt and Playix were shot plenty of times, but they continued on after being shot to shoot and eventually kill agents. CBS covers the Miami shootout 30 years later, saying, despite outnumbering the suspects 4-1, the agents found themselves pinned down by heavy rifle fire and unable to respond effectively due to their much smaller service handguns. The suspects had a Ruger assault rifle, a shotgun, and a .357 caliber handgun. Now, on the FBI's official website, when asked what kinds of guns do the FBI use, they say agents carry bureau-issued or approved handguns and may be issued additional equipment as needed. Those in a specialized area, like the hostage rescue teams, may also be issued weapons that fit their duties. Agents are allowed to carry personal weapons, provided that they do not violate the policing regarding firearms. Unless otherwise instructed, agents are required to be armed at all times. This is very vague. And I think there's a reason for that. One of the most important angles from the actual case was that these 2 criminals, Matt and Playix, got the weapons they got. They were above the capacity of the FBI. The FBI is now so vague about what weapons they have because hopefully they are continuing to evolve their own arsenal. Because incidents like this where they can't actually outgun them, especially when they're 4-1, can't outgun them, that's a pretty big issue. Being able to actually increase weapons, having additional equipment when needed, allows the FBI to stay ahead of who they're tracking. There's no worse feeling than essentially the U.S. being outgunned by a hillbilly down the street trying to steal your Candy Crush money. Whatever. It's a very bad look, and I'm glad that the FBI is taking steps to avoid it by actually increasing their firepower. Speaking of upgrading, the Model 13, being the pistol used in the Miami shootout, ended up being the last revolver used. You see, the FBI had a long history of using revolvers. It was their main thing. It was the gun of the time. But as times evolved and they got outgunned in a 1986 shootout, they had to upgrade. As the NRA puts it, the Model 13 was the last revolver issued by the FBI. After more than 50 years, the primary sidearm of the agents would become the semi-automatic pistol. They couldn't use those things for too long. They had to upgrade. It doesn't stop there. This event didn't just say, okay, we gotta get better. This actually made them want to think, we gotta keep improving. This is actually gonna be a big step. We see later in 1997, The FBI officially adopts the Glock .40 S&W pistol for general agent use. This is clearly a sign that they are not going to stop when they think they've done enough. The FBI has learned from the mistakes from the shootout, and they're like, we will always be ahead. We will try to be ahead. Being ahead is a nice little fun goal for the government to have, but a very important part of this case in particular was actually the trauma many of the agents faced after the event. For instance, one McNeil, who had been an agent during the entire event, he was knocked out during the crossfire and had regained consciousness only to see one of his fellow agents be, quote, executed by one of the suspects. Being the bloodiest shootout in FBI history, obviously, it gets national attention. McNeil is then interviewed by the LA Times, and he's recounting what happened during the entire ordeal. One of the things he says is that he's trying to forget about it by owning racehorses. But of course, I mentioned that in 1981, he had already had experience with horses. And obviously, as someone with trauma would do, they try to forget about their memory by doing things they like. For instance, him having horses and training them and having fun with those, racing them as well. But unfortunately, part of the trauma that he can't get over is doing the things he loves. He was shot in the leg during the firefight, and his leg still hurts as if they were shot that day. As he explains, my legs feel as bad as they did that day I got shot. And what's so unfortunate about the situation is that McNeil was a runner. He competed in the Orange Bowl marathon, and one of the houses he passed in his morning runs happened to be where Maddox lived, one of the suspects in the case. The same Times article then shows us exactly the extent of what McNeil saw that day. As he says, McNeil credits Ed Mireles, a former Marine, with saving his life and a few others. Mireles, critically wounded and near blacking out, fired 6 shots and finally silenced Maddox and Platt, who were attempting to back the car over one of their fallen agents. Backing over the car into one of the fallen agents. Absolutely insane to think about and see. Absolutely insane. Another way they actually experience these psychological effects is Mireles himself. As I've already talked about, he was so disoriented that he almost shot one of his brothers. But later, it's found out that he was experiencing this sort of inoculation effect, which it now takes a direct approach in the phenomenon in training, stopping this from happening again. The trauma from this event doesn't just stop at their lives. What we learn from how they deal with it and what they experience later is now helping people in their training and stopping them from having the same exact problems in the field. So you know the incident, April 11th, 1986. Platt and Maddox use a stolen vehicle, running away from a bank robbery, but this time being tailed by 2 agents. Those agents get into a car chase leading with a crash where 14 agents end up surrounding Platt and Maddox, firing at them, trying to subdue the targets. This firefight in the suburb leads to 5 minutes of continuous shots, disorientation from agents, and a general lack of battle knowledge. One thing leads to another, 2 agents dead, 2 suspects dead, and 5 injured. We've learned a lot from this encounter, of course. 1, you can't go rushing into a battle like that. There's got to be some actual tactics planning. You can't just drive your vehicle willy-nilly. Gotta know how to drive, gotta know how to shoot, gotta know how to aim. And of course, you can't just use any weapon. You've got to continuously upgrade those weapons. Revolvers, no good. Let's upgrade a little bit here. You can't be undergunned when facing suspects. Absolutely no-go. A lot more bodies that way. And when it comes to what they experience in the field, FBI agents can't be expected to just simply go through it and be done. We got to remember, when people go through these traumatic experiences, we can take that knowledge and learn. People learn how to train people using these experiences. That's the importance of this entire thing. Not just what happened, but what we learned from it. Being training, improvements, and better trauma acknowledgement. Well, that's why you should care. And of course, I already told you what happened. So I'll see you guys in the next episode of How Did It Happen and Why Do I Care?